Welcome to San Diego Integral, August 12th, 2023. Our topic today, Awakening the Spirit of Evolution, Animism meets Integral Consciousness, presented by Eloy Maes and Jerry Golech.
Okay, hi everybody. Oops. Welcome to San Diego Integral. I'm Eloy Maes and I'll be our meeting host today. I'm a proud member of the San Diego Integral leadership crew along with Jerry and Tom, and also Kathy and Liz, who couldn't be here today. We have an intriguing sounding presentation scheduled for today titled Awakening the Spirit of Evolution, Animism meets Integral Consciousness. And it'll be facilitated by our own Jerry Golech and assisted by me. Before we get started, please note we're recording. Zoom will usually only record the people who are speaking or are unmuted and speaking during the meeting. And we just started doing this where the introductions that we do on the recording will be edited out of the final version. So you don't have to feel shy about introducing yourself because it won't be on the final version. And the link to the recording will be posted in a couple of days after the event on our SDI YouTube channel, San Diego Integral YouTube channel. Also, you can find our future events on our website at sandiegointegral.org. I'll put that in the chat in a bit. And we're also on Meetup and Facebook, and you can find links for both of those on our website as well. Meetup is actually the best way to get meeting announcements sent to your inbox. That's our primary RSVP tool. So please join one of those groups and I'll point you in the direction of Meetup as a preference. And if you have any questions, you can contact one of us in the leadership team, either through Meetup or through the website. Our next meeting is going to be on September 9th, and we'll feature Jeff Fitch, who was originally scheduled to be here today, but had some travel arrangements that couldn't be, anyway, travel complications. So, so this is Jeff Fitch at Pacific Integral, and the topic will be the paradox and ethics of perspective taking. And lastly, before we introduce new people, I want to invite you to make a donation to San Diego Integral to help us cover our fees. And this is an all volunteer organization, so nobody gets paid. It's out of love for the topic and for the community. And again, you can donate at sandiegointegral.org. Okay, well, thanks again. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And we'll dive right into our topic today. And the topic is Awakening the Spirit of Evolution, Animism meets Integral Consciousness. And it'll be presented by our own Jerry Golech and with some assistance by me. I think I mentioned that before. So Jerry's a graduate of Pacific Integral's GTC, Generating Transformative Change. And he's been active in the Integral community for years, and he's attended numerous Integral events, including Integral living rooms in Boulder and recently the Integral European Conference. And he's also a long-time member of our leadership team. And I'm going to add, he's a dear friend of mine. So with that, I give the floor to Jerry.
Okay, thank you, Eloy, and thanks everyone for being here. So the topic today is basically animism. And I'll toss out here, Eloy and I had a lot of fun playing with this, and one of the tools we used, and again, Eloy was the leader in helping me to explore in this way, but we used ChatGPT, and ChatGPT actually was the one that came up with our title. So, and we used it a lot. We used it a lot, and then we would find we would use it as a kind of brainstorming, and then to deconstruct and reconstruct things. And it was fun to use it to play with this. So, but this is our title, and it's about animism. And just to get us started, animism, one way to describe that would be a worldview where consciousness or spirit is recognized in all things, so that we would feel the aliveness of not only other animals, but also of plants or what we would commonly refer to as objects, stone or the earth or a cloud, for example. And so recognizing this in all things is our kind of our working definition for today. And this was inspired in large part by a podcast called The Emerald by Josh Gray. And if any of you find this at all intriguing, I would highly encourage you to to dive into that Emerald podcast. Just beautiful work. And one of the things that I recognize when I listen to that, first of all, it's just been very moving for me. It's been kind of the latest exploration, and Eloy and I have enjoyed kind of playing with that and diving into this territory. But it's just a vast topic, and I am by no means an expert. I dip my toe in there, but we think about like thousands of generations experiencing this worldview where the world is alive and the clouds are alive, or communicating with ancestors. All of these different things for thousands of generations, and then as if there was only one generation. In other words, there are thousands of generations within thousands of different cultures. So we're only going to touch on it, and I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. So I put, let's explore imperfectly together. I think all of us are going to have like language that we use that is not quite right, or concepts that maybe we're not aware of that would temper this, and again, to different traditions that we don't know about. So, but it's just an exploration of what animism, and again, it's kind of guided by the fact, as Eloy and I have worked on this, that what animism, or this approach, what it has brought to me that relates to my life, that's useful, that we can take into the integral model and use. And one thing that I'll talk about a little bit today as we go through this, and again, this has kind of been one of the explorations for me for the last many years, and greatly enhanced by our next month's speaker, Jeff Fitch, and the Pacific Integral Program. But it's dealing with this, like the embodied wisdom, or the other thing that comes from Theory U for me is the generative space that we can move into, that's often very non-rational, non-linear. It's not the kind of like, and this presentation will not be the kind of very clear-cut, point-by-point, logical, rational analysis of something. But it's more like, it's not thinking, it's more like letting go and feeling, noticing, sensing what arises in the present moment. That's the kind of thing that I want to try to engender and have happen between us today. And a couple helpful practices in there are that one is the term presence, which is like today, all of us are here. And as far as I'm concerned, and I know some of you, and I trust the rest of you, that you're just amazing people. There's this tremendous amount of depth of your knowledge and your study and your life experiences and the tragedy and the loves and all of the things that have happened through each of you. Well, we're bringing that here with us today. That's all present here. And so, us all together moving into this generative space, let's see what arises in the present moment between us. That's presence. The other thing that's, I think, so important is that it's the everything is true but partial, and it's one of the foundational practices or realizations in integral, I think. And so a way of embracing this, every perspective has truth in it but is also partial. A way of embracing that is that if say somebody says something and I quote disagree with it, I see a different way of looking at it. Instead of saying, yeah, but this or that, if I just say yes, that, and this other thing as well. Because one of the things that again, I would have to say I learned a lot of this from Jeff Fitch in the Generating Transformative Change program, is that if we say yes, that, and, we're taking in more perspectives. So rather than rejecting one perspective and saying mine is right and yours is wrong, we're taking them all in, because in this space, one of the things we find is that paradox is expected, it's honored, and it's inevitable. But taking more of it in is one way of expanding our perspectives in the integral space. I think since this is integral meets animism, this is an integral chart. So if you're new, you don't have to really read all the stuff on there. But this is the quadrant model, which is so familiar to those of us who have studied some integral theory. And we'll notice the lower left quadrant is the area where it's the inside of the collective. And so that's kind of one way of saying the space that we're playing in. And in the integral circles, we talk about we space, which is when, like you and I, when we all get together and we connect in this generative space. But the exploration today is to try to develop we space with entities other than the other humans. So it's to have we space with the plants, or we space with the stones, or we space with the clouds. That would be one way of looking at this. And you can see in the other, like the upper right, where it talks about the atoms, the molecules, the different types of organisms. So we're thinking about, or maybe exploring, connecting with those. Now, one of the things that we in the integral world might be familiar with would be things like, for example, the pre-trans fallacy or anthropomorphism, where the pre-trans fallacy is where, like in animism, like we're looking at cultures that we would say, oh, that's an animistic culture or whatever, or ritual. Like you might see people dancing around the campfire, and these people dancing around the campfire may have this dance that has come down for hundreds of generations, and it's tied in with their entire culture and belief system and worldview. And this ritual that they're performing is something that helps the individuals and that culture evolve. But you might also see some people dancing around a campfire, and they're trying to get, they're drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon and trying to get laid. Like that's looks the same from the outside, but we don't want to make that mistake of confusing the maybe very unsophisticated and perhaps even pathological action for one that is very sophisticated and very evolved. So that's the pre-trans fallacy. We want to be careful of that, and we certainly will make that mistake as we look at cultures which we many times haven't actually experienced. We're looking at them in a historical perspective or whatever. And of course, anthropomorphism, that is attributing human characteristics to non-human, we could say again, objects. So we want to be aware of those, but as I said before, we don't necessarily want to reject those things, but we want to notice them if they're happening, because there could be benefit in that. I could gain something from that, as long as I'm aware that that's what I'm doing. As opposed to trying to find the true nature of the object or of the other entity that I'm meeting with. The other thing I'll point out here as we start this exploration would be that something that we had a speaker several months ago, Sushant Shrestha, and one of his points that I thought was so profound was that in the integral models that we have, we believe I think we endeavor to bring in as many perspectives as possible. That's part of the integral project. But one of the things that happens is there are perspectives that we just are unaware of. we just don't, like when we talk about indigenous wisdom, when I talk about that, I don't know very much about that. There are many indigenous practices or perspectives that I simply can't include in my integral model because I don't know about them. I don't even see them. And sometimes if I hear something, I go, wow, that's really interesting, but it's hard for me to hold on to because it doesn't really fit in my culture, my experience. So that's something that's going to be true today as well. But today's exploration, I hopefully structured it so that we will each experience some animistic worldview, some animistic, touch into that. And we'll, so again, so we want to look for things that are unfamiliar to us, would be one way of saying that. The next little section here, personhood relationships, I'm going to turn it over to Eloy. He's going to jump in here for one of the perspectives that he was finding valuable. So go ahead, Eloy.
Yeah, so personhood is when you feel like you have a relationship with some non-human entity. And the easy way for a lot of us is if we've had a relationship with a pet, with your dog or your cat or a bird or something, you tend to think of that as a person. You think of them as a family member. If somebody asks you, is your dog your family and family member? A lot of people would say yes if they have any deep love for their dog at all, unless they're raising them for other purposes. But you may have also had that experience. I'm especially thinking of a little older technology, like when your car doesn't start, you might talk to your car as if it's a person, right? Come on, baby, let's get going. I need to go, please, please, Or you talk about it affectionately if you're selling a car you've had for a long time. Oh, she took me so many places. She was, she was good to me and all this stuff. So you have like an emotional attachment to that, and you perceive it as having consciousness. You perceive, I say it, her, him, that as having consciousness. And we can extend that to other things, like, if you have a sacred object, or like I have a favorite tree I go visit that's just a block away. I just love walking up and seeing that tree, and I talk to that tree. And yes, the tree is alive, but it's not what we would call animate. You don't see it moving around and jumping around or talk. Most people would perceive a tree as an it, but for me, this tree is my buddy, it's my teacher, and that can be extended to things like rocks and yeah, that's just to give you some example. If you have trouble with the idea of animism, that you've probably already done something like that. So, thank you.
All right, thanks, Eloy. And I think that when we were talking about this before, one of the things you said that I really took in, it was meaningful to me. We're saying like these, like in the same way we might say a dog is a member of our family, the concept, or not the concept, but the experience of walking through the world and feeling that the trees are my family, that the mountain is my family, that the clouds are my family. And for me, that gave me a real sense of what it might be like, or not only what it might be like, but I actually experienced what it is like to walk through the world with that perspective. So that's kind of the a little bit of a framework of in the integral model. And I thought for the first exercise today, what I'd like to do, and I really value in our group here the breakouts where we get to be a little bit more in intimate connection with each other and cultivate this we space. So I'm going to try to focus on a lot less talking and more interactions within the breakout. So the first breakout I'd like to do, as I said before, like you all bring a lot to the table here. There are maybe many of you who have vast experience in this world of relating to animism that I don't have, um, or there could be all kinds of. I mean, again, you're bringing a lot to the table, is I guess what I'm saying. So I would like to just start with first impressions, like without too much other explanation. What is your what arises for you in the present moment when we say animism? Uh, and so, do you have experiences that like everything is alive? Have you had those experiences? Uh, um, do you have experiences of being in relationship in this I thou relationship with non-human entities? Would be another question. And then, so maybe you will have something to contribute in that way. And then also, if you experience resistance or contraction, that's fine as well. Like you might say, I think it's a bunch of nonsense. I mean, that might be what comes up for you. And if so, we want to have that perspective as well, um, and bring that in and accept all of those different perspectives. Now, I want to talk just a little bit before we go into our breakout, just a little bit about the WeSpace practices that, again, we've done this quite a bit in San Diego Integral. And so if, and let me show what this looks like. So if you have had experience with this in San Diego Integral here or in other spaces, I'd like you to help kind of facilitate this kind of generative WeSpace that I'd like us to get into today. So when we move into the breakouts, a couple of things. One is everybody, you get there, there's always like about at least a minute or so of like, what's going on here? Hi, how are you? Oh, so just say hi. That's the first thing. After you say hi, um, please move into 1 minute of stillness. So if somebody can kind of time that, or if you don't have a timer, just guess, but 1 minute of just stillness to center yourself. Many of you have deep practices. Center yourself and look for what arises in your awareness relating to animism. And then after that 1 minute, each person take a turn. So go take about 2 minutes each to describe what comes up, what came up for you in the stillness. And and when I say things arise in our body mind, again, you might have a feeling in your belly and you go, oh, that feels like, oh, fear or something. Like when I approach animism, I'm afraid. You might notice I'm just making that up. But whatever shows up for you, um, that's what we'd like you to speak about and share. And then after each person speaks, rather than just move on, take just a few breaths. And what you might notice is that what the person before you just said has influenced you. In other words, what was arising for me 2 minutes ago was the perfect thing to say in the breakout group has changed, and now something else is arising. So feel free to share that. And then the other thing is, so if say there are 4 people in that breakouts, that's what we're going to plan for. When you get all 4 people have gone, that should take about 8 minutes, probably a little longer with some transition time. But there'll be a few minutes left. We're going to go for 15 minutes, but stay in the space. So rather than, oh, we got through our 2, 4, 6, 8, now we could just talk about the baseball game. We don't want to do that. We want to stay in the space of deeply listening, watching what's arising in the present moment, and then share as you're called to speak. So that's our WeSpace practice. So I suppose before we go into this breakout, are there any just quick technical questions or anything that's unclear? I'll post these the breakout questions in the chat, and then Eloy's going to drop us into breakouts of 4 for 15 minutes. Okay with everybody? I don't see any questions. So Eloy,
I'll make a
post that in
comment though. If you don't want to be in a
Yeah.
breakout room, just say no when you ask, and you'll stay in the main room. Breakout rooms are not recorded, so you can say what open your heart there if you like, and it'll just be between you and the people in that room.
Okay, so I'm posting this in the chat, and you should be able to see that. Open the chat back up when you're in the breakouts if you wish.
And if you
Okay.
have any problems, click the button to ask for help, and I'll come help. And here we go.
Breakout sessions are not recorded. Okay, I think, are we all back? I believe so. Okay, so what I would like to do at this time then is invite maybe 2 or 3 shares of anything that occurred for you in your breakout sessions that maybe we found meaningful or moving that you would like to share. So if we have anybody who would like to do that, you can raise your hand, or um, if there's not a big line, feel free to just unmute yourself and speak. Elliot, go right ahead.
I wasn't sure if I'd done much animism lately, and then I realized that yesterday I was going through some of my old stuff and doing some Marie Kondo style. Does it spark joy? And like, no, throw it away. And I was like, oh yeah, that's there's a lot of feeling the aliveness of the objects around me in that practice. And yeah, I figured that's very relatable. I'm sure everyone knows what that's like.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I love the way for me, like my explorations into the animism, I find it applicable in my daily life when I touch into it, as you're saying. Yeah. Mhm. Thank you.
I wondered about the word animism and being animated, which means anima in terms of soul, seeing everything in living with soul, whether stone or that beautiful image you showed with the lion, where we automatically know a baboon I saw, but whatever we project is right there. Is there a connection between the two words?
Seems like there certainly would be. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's important to point out. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. The image, by the way, it's right on the beach right down here. I took that a couple of weeks ago when I was on down by Torrey Pines State Beach.
Suzanne,
Kabir?
what Suzanne, you just said really touched right into the heart of the comment that I was going to make. One of the people in our breakout reflected on kind of an uneasiness with going too quickly into this rock or that cloud, is a dialogic partner in some rational sense. And what stood out for me was this perhaps inclination to anthropomorphize the sentience or the consciousness, and therefore, like, the rock doesn't behave like Aunt Edna, so it clearly isn't animate. And yet it kind of, and so what you said about, instead of, like humanic, it's more on a soul level, that there's some animus that really like resonates with me, that there's some sort of beautiful spectrum of awaken something or other, with consciousness, to not be too bland, but and that does, how do we think about this sublime quality that isn't just it went to grade school like me kind of thing.
Thank you, Kabir.
I know for me, in our group, I had asked the question if we're discerning between the words animism, pantheism, and panentheism. And how does that fit into the how you're presenting animism?
Yeah, I mean, just one thing I would say about that is, like, as I said, there's just like I could probably identify 300 threads that Eloy and I have been playing with, and we had to pick 5, to talk about today. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, we want to go into this kind of technical distinctions between those things, but yes, thanks for bringing that all in, because those are all ways of looking at things that we can find valuable in our perspective taking. I want to take just one more quick comment from Christine, and then we're going to move on to our next sections, if that's okay. Go ahead, Christine. Thanks, Marjorie.
Thank you. I talked with Marjorie and Eric, and we were talking about the usual, you know, the trees and the pets and things that we are familiar with. But what about robots and AI and what's coming down the pike, where they're trying to, well, they are imbuing technological things with humanity? And how are we going to relate to all of that coming down? You know, are we going to think of them, those things, as human? It's just a big question. Don't have the answers, but I think it's something worth thinking about, because certainly AI is going to have human characteristics, and they want us to think of certain things as human. So just a thought.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. And that was not a paid announcement, everybody, but you're just plugging right into one of the Emerald podcasts. I mean, he has a section on AI. It's just, again, to me, a really astonishing perspectives on that. So I'd encourage everyone to jump in and listen to that. But yeah, great questions. Okay, so I'd like to move on to another section here. And again, I'm targeting this with like some exercises, hopefully brief, although I find I think I talk too much sometimes, but I want to do a little guided meditation. And so let me just share this screen real quick. And then we're going to move into a guided meditation and then another breakout, kind of like debriefing that in the same way that we just did this breakout. So let's see here. Okay, so this guided meditation that I'm going to lead is kind of, it's what it's based on. Is it based on, like, as Eloy and I have been exploring this Emerald podcast, then it kind of, you know, I could say, what kind of touching on what Suzanne was saying, it animated my world. Like I was walking around and noticing things that I wouldn't have noticed had it not been activated by listening to this podcast and kind of exploring in this direction. And so I put together a guided meditation, and I was putting these threads together of these things that touched me over the last, month or so. And I was like, well, how do they fit together? And so actually we processed it through ChatGPT. And one of the things that it came up with was, it said that, oh, well, you're touching on different developmental lines. And so in those who are familiar with the integral model would know that there are different lines of development. And so that's one of the reasons that as I, like, what touched me over several weeks relating to this, to things being animate, was touching on different aspects of me. And they're all part of me, they're all related, but they aren't necessarily, like, it's harder to make the logical connections or to make them fit in a linear way. But we're touching on the cognitive line. So I might say something about some science, and the affective line, something emotional, or the somatic line, something felt in the body, or the spiritual line, something experiencing the spirit of another entity. And so again, all of these things fit through this integral model. And again, this was one interesting way of looking at what's happening in this guided meditation. So I would like to invite you all to move into this, kind of meditative exercise, which is going to be kind of taking us into a little snippets of this perspective that, again, have touched me, and hopefully they'll have some impact for you. So the first thing to do might be to just kind of shift your position in your chair or wherever you're sitting in, just move a little bit, and maybe move into a contemplative posture. Many of you have very robust practices. So move into a posture that works for you. Take a few deep breaths, and close your eyes if you'd like. And consider the perspective that this idea or concept of animism is really only a few hundred years old. The word wasn't even invented for most of human existence. And prior to that, our ancestors didn't believe in it. They just experienced the world that way. It was just a part of the way, the natural worldview. That would be like recognizing spirit, recognizing like a consciousness in all things. Listening to the voice of the storm or the voice of the butterfly, in relationship with the mountain, perhaps celebrating or surrendering to sacred places, sensing the wisdom and the spirit of the non-human world. We might say they lived an enchanted existence. And as integralists, we may have awareness of our own projections, biases that are in play when we consider non-human entities. And all of that's good. Let's take all of that in. But one way that we might look at these earlier developmental levels, including developmental levels of humans, but also the earlier developmental levels of matter, is that all of this is foundational. So animistic perspectives and animistic worldview is a foundation necessary for our later evolution. We know that by the stages models that an integral perspective builds on these foundations of earlier developmental levels. So a question might be, how can we reestablish or build or inhabit this foundational worldview where there's spirit in all creation? What are the foundational aspects of that? So for this exercise, feel your body and notice the inside of your body, where the edges of your body are. And the fact that the edges might not be quite as defined as we think they are, that as we sit, our body's giving off, heat, other forms of radiation, electromagnetic energies. We're breathing in what was not us becomes us. We're breathing out what was us becomes not us. And this constant exchange of energies is what we are. And as we're sitting in our chair, we know that our science tells us we're built of these atoms, which are resting, but not touching all the other atoms that are below us, this earth below us. And every rock out in the driveway participates in holding us in this space, suspended slightly above the earth. All of the molecules, the air above us, just right. It moves out of our way. We breathe it in, we breathe it out. We're suspended in this perfect field that is what is our life. So do these things, the air above us, the earth below us, the things without which I would not be alive, can we say that they participate in our lives? And is it not then more accurate to say that we are alive, including our surroundings? Can you feel that presence, the spirit or the energy, this relationship with all that surrounds you? Imagine for a moment being in a forest with filtered sunlight coming down through the trees, this energy from the sun touching, reflecting off of, absorbing into every surface. And there's a chirp from a bird. And that chirp comes through the air, goes into our ear, vibrates some little thing in there that allows us to hear this sound. And imagine that that sound, those vibrations, touched every single surface that I can see, touched every leaf, the bottom of every leaf, every stick, every tree, every piece of dirt, the puddle in the forest. And this is what our lives are really like, these constant interactions, our energy moving outward, energy moving into us. Imagine the electromagnetic waves from your heartbeat moving out from you, and we're receiving from others. Imagine the loving intention of your heart moving outward, affecting other entities. These non-human entities that we encounter, that participate in our life, that notice and react to our presence. We're affected by them, they are affected by us, including what surrounds us in this moment. So let's take a few minutes, take 2 minutes in stillness to sense the presence, the spirit of everything around us that holds us in a loving embrace. Okay, so at this time, if you would gently return to the present moment, time and space that you're in, come back into the main room with us. And what I'd like to do is, again, sort of gently move us into breakouts again to kind of share any experiences that happened for you during the guided meditation. And I'll post some questions. So the question would be, did you touch into anything foundational is there any, I guess, a deep, strong base within the body mind upon which you can build your responses to life, the foundations of these earlier parts of us that are the foundation of our integral existence. And another question might be, do you find your body mind feeling more alive or enchanted or connected? So I'll post those in the chat. And Eloy, I think I'd like to move the breakouts to maybe 12 minutes, if we could do that. So unless there are any pressing questions, we'll move right on into the breakouts, and I'll post the questions in the chat. Okay, welcome back, everyone. And here again, I'd like to just take a few, maybe 2 or 3 shares of anything that came up for you in the meditation or the breakout sessions. Anybody like to share anything? Go ahead and raise your hand or unmute and speak if no one else is ahead of you.
I'll just quickly say, good job, Jerry. When we came back in here, I just saw a whole screen full of grinning faces.
Thanks, Kabir.
What struck me that I shared in my breakout room is exactly how much time we spend with awareness of the animated world. That when Jerry said, what's foundational, I leaped right to, it's even primary, that at least for me it is, I get the feeling, the energy level, and then I try to language it. But that it feels like an original process to me, that we feel it at multiple levels, not just the cognitive level. And then the cognitive level is another evolutionary step that has its advantages, but that how primary the animated level is. So I'm going to really noodle that for a bit more.
Thank you, Tom.
I noticed that I always have such a great experience in meditations when we are together as a group, virtually or non-virtually. It makes it so much more just yeah, effective in a way, or deep. So yeah, great to be sharing in presence with you all.
Thank you. Okay. So if there are no more comments, let me just, I'm going to answer. Suzanne had posted something in the chat about sharing that meditation, and I will say that of course, the session will be recorded, so it will be on the recording in just a few days, and I will be happy to send you a written copy, Suzanne. And so unless there are more comments, then we'll move on to our next section here. So let's see here. This is, let me share this screen. So our next exercise is relationship with a non-human entity. And I'll just say that partially this one is from that I don't know if I mentioned this in the full group, but there was a presenter at the Integral European Conference, and his name's Owen Oki, and he did a session of communicating with non-human entities, and it was just so powerful, moving for me. And so this is kind of a snapshot of that. And so the idea of this is to, as a an exercise, to choose a non-human entity. And again, you'll notice I'm trying to not use the word an object, because I'm trying to trying to not have that distinction between I'm a live thing and that's an object. I'm trying to say all of us entities have aliveness and are animate. And so I want to choose one and then have a relationship with it, build that we space, or we'll spend 5 minutes to build we space with that object, with that entity. And you have a couple of options that you can do for this. The first one is I have 2 images on the slide that follows this, which I'll leave those up on the screen, and we're going to play some background music during this 5-minute period. So, but if you'd like to choose something yourself instead of the images that I have, if you'd like to choose something that you might have close to you, maybe you have a sacred stone or a touchstone near you, or a plant, or your iPod, AirPods, anything is fine to develop a relationship with. And so we want to take some time, try to, again, think of what do we mean by a we space relationship with that entity. And you may speak to it, or listen to it, or observe and see what arises within you, what lessons you may learn from this entity. And again, we want to hold the intention of connecting with the true nature of this entity, not necessarily projecting things onto it, but what is its nature and what does it have to say or to teach. And so here are the 2 images that I have. The first one is the stones, and these are in Custer State Park in South Dakota. And then the other flower is the flower from my backyard garden. I took the picture a couple days ago, and I just thought it was an interesting image. It speaks to me. And I will say that it's so fascinating. I think something that so many of us have learned in the last couple of years with our life on Zoom is that it's like we are all well aware that like that flower in my backyard is very different from this picture of this flower in my backyard. This is just an image. And yet we can find, using our imagination, however we do it, I don't know, but we have managed to have like profound connections with other humans in these little boxes over the last several years, 3 or 4 years now. And so the same thing, I think that you can use these images or find an object of your own. And we'll go for 5 minutes, and with the music playing, when the music fades out, that'll be the end of the session. And then we'll again go into some quick breakouts to discuss that. So any questions before we start? So I don't think I need to post this in the chat, but the idea is to form a we space relationship with an object or image of your choice. Okay, so if everybody is ready, I'm going to go ahead and start this music, and we will form this connection for 5 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. Our next, we're going to move into another breakout then, and reflecting on this exercise. Did you establish a relationship with this non-human entity? Was there any lesson or wisdom from your encounter? And do you find your body-mind feeling more alive, enchanted, or connected? And similar to what we did before, say hello, 1 minute of stillness. Each person shares for 2 minutes and then pause between speakers and then stay in the space. So let's move into, and I think in the interest of time here, Eloy, can maybe we make this for 10 minutes. So I'll post this in the chat and let's move into the breakouts. Welcome back, everyone. I think a few people are still returning here. Okay. All right. Well, we're actually drawing fairly close to the end time for the official part of the meeting, or the formal part. And so I would like to invite maybe have time for 1 or 2 shares if anybody would like to share anything from anything that happened today. And maybe in particular the last session with your non-human entity, or from the breakout group, but if it's anything from the entire meeting today, please feel free to jump in.
I will. I don't know. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
I
Jesse,
got
go
in-
ahead.
I got totally inspired by my breakout room mates to connect with my car. It's like my car is this complete object to me that I have no connection to, and you can tell by looking at it. You can tell by being in it. It's really different than my phone or my dog or my office. It's like, it's almost bad girl, you know, like it. I don't appreciate her or anything. So now I'm inspired. I'm going to say hello for the first time today.
Thank you, Jesse. She'll appreciate that.
I'll say something.
Mhm.
Here.
Go ahead, Judith.
This is my first time, and I really enjoyed being here. It's been very inspiring and fun. And my mates, as Jesse was one, and I was inspired by my group, and I'm inspired by the people here, and I think we're all doing such wonderful work in the world, trying to bring light and love.
Thank you. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
There's something, and that is that our group, this is the first time, I believe, that I've ever been in one of these things where we didn't change partners in our breakout rooms, but we stayed with the same ones. And it was low. I mean, it's nice when you change partners and you get to talk to different people. But we've really found, formed a bond. We were able to form a bond over this when we were just with each other. I mean, it sort of feels like, an extended family, if you will, just for the moment, perhaps, but nevertheless.
Yes, thank you, Lynn.
Mm.
I'll share about the objects that I happened. I have 3 crystals, rocks for my desk, and yeah, I had a thought that came up, that wow, 5 minutes to contemplate a crystal, it seems like an inordinate amount of time. And then it ended up passing by very quickly as I really looked and had eyes to see. And George in my group had a great question, which was, how did I sense the commonality between myself and this entity? And when you really look with eyes to see, you sense that common spaciousness, that pervades yourself and this rock, and that spaciousness is what we are, 99.9% of us. So this was a great experience. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Yeah, there's a part of it where for me, as I've explored this, like I find myself walking through an enchanted world. Like it's the same world I've been in, but I'm experiencing it differently. Yeah. So maybe any, yeah, did I see Mary?
That's interesting because in our group, we noticed the word enchanted and the choice of that word. And we knew that there was some reason why you use that word, and you kind of shed some light on that right now with enchanted.
Thanks, Mary. Good having you here. Okay. Well, I think it's probably about time to wrap up here. So I just, so greatly appreciate everyone's kind attention and participation, and the comments and experiences, just really touched me. So I want to thank everyone for being here, and hope that you got a lot out of that. As usual, we'll post a recording on Meetup and on the website in a couple of days, and so you're welcome to access that if you like. And at this point, I think that I'll turn it over to Eloy, and there may be, we want to make any announcements or anything like that, and then of course we will have our informal session starting in just a few minutes.
Yeah, so for those who can stay, yeah, please join us. We can get into a deeper discussion here. And let's start first off by thanking Jerry for all the work he put into this. This was amazing, considering that we got notice that Jeff Fitch wasn't able to make it, I forget, Tuesday or Wednesday. So we were able to put this together pretty quickly, and I would say it didn't look like it was thrown together. It looked like it was like a lot of preparation went into it, and I know a lot of preparation did, but that was good and much appreciated. So
I wanted to just say, like, so Eloy and I definitely worked on this together, but like there was a question of like who was going to be kind of the main presenter, and Eloy's leadership again came through here, and I think the phrase was something like, "Well, you're the one who volunteered, dude."
Well, and I happen to know Jerry as a let's get it done kind of guy. So and anyway, yeah, I was happy to have him take the lead, and came out really well. Thank you. So we'll transition into the chat in just a few minutes. So I want to say thanks and goodbye to everybody that can't stay, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. And those who can stay, it's going to be like popcorn style discussion. I'll bring in a few things to frame the meeting or frame that part of the meeting. But and if you have any questions about these meetings or have suggestions for speakers or presenters, or if you are someone who wants to speak or present, some of us have already done this, then contact Jerry or Tom or Kathy Andrews, or the four of us are the main ones, and then there's Liz. But you can contact us through the meetup, we have a Facebook page. I guess sometime we should put our emails at the end. I'll do that next time. Okay, so thank you everybody for has to leave now. I'm gonna switch to full screen here so I can see everybody. Welcome, Larry. So there's a couple of things I wanted to throw in here that one thought I had about not a thought, but I've heard this before too, and we have this, like, once we start getting into this animism, it's like, oh, everything's animate, right? And in a way it is. Like if we use our Holland's model of integral theory, like, you know, every molecule contains atoms, every atom contains subatomic particles going up, you know, every cell contains molecules, every organ contains cells, and onward and onward. So in that sense, we're connected with everything, but I know I have trouble finding life or a sense of another being in a piece of plastic or concrete, or, you know, different things like that. And even, you know, there's even some rocks that just don't do it for me, but it might do it for somebody else, you know. So that's one thing I wanted to say. Oh, and the other interesting thing about doing this kind of holonic view of animism is that we can think of that well, one of the things I like to think of is that, like, the sacredness of places. Like sometimes, I mean, Derek mentioned this in one of the breakouts, like driving through someplace and you just feel something that just like magical, and like Jerry's word, enchanted about the place. And so my sense is that if I can sense into the atomic and subatomic aliveness of everything, then I'm always at home wherever I am. I might not be comfortable, you know, being in the desert on a hot day, but I can feel connected with everything that's there. And I also wanted to mention that, and this came up in a couple of groups I was in, about people mentioned angels and guides, and, you know, the earlier our ancestors all had gods and goddesses and all kinds of entities that were alive for them. They would, you know, talk to the bugs and read things from, like the Polynesians. There's a story in the Emerald about how the Polynesians can tell their sense of place by the feel of the spray from the current. It's like, you know, amazing stuff. So I just wanted to bring in some of those aspects. And then in the breakout, one of the breakouts I was in, Marjorie asked about pantheism and all kinds of other stuff. There's just all kinds of variations of this, but it all kind of leads to the same place with different flavors. So and I'll just go, are there any just general questions, and then we can go into a discussion. Okay, and earlier Kabir put the link to the Emerald in there, and I highly recommend that Emerald. It's not only good wisdom, good thoughts, but it's beautifully produced. It's like a work of art, each podcast, and it's a state changer. Dropping into those. Would you like to say more about that, Kabir?
Yeah, that was, Eloy, that was really, you really hit the nail on the head for me there. I listened to that podcast a month ago or something, and promptly shared it with everybody in my address book. And one of the things I said about it that I really felt was I really felt like, I mean, I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I thought, this fellow really is treating it like its own raw art form. And I kind of fixated on that a bit. And then I noticed it took me back, and I remembered some old radio shows. There was one,
yes, good.
A Prairie Home Companion. And but the kind of the full multimedia experience where he weaves interview and narrative and dialogue and music and sound effects, and it just was such a textured experience. I really appreciate it very deeply. And I think we're about due for the rationalist case for animism, I think. You know,
Say again?
I think we were about due for the rationalist case for animism.
Oh, okay.
I really felt he delivered well.
Well, I'm actually thinking about playing a clip from it just to share that. Or do you have it up, Kabir?
I don't. I could probably get it.
Okay, I got one on the animism is normative consciousness. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to have us jump in the middle somewhere rather than. Okay, well, I'm just going to go with wherever it is.
The Emerald.
Oh, this is the opening.
All that's happening on this green jewel in space. Animism is normative consciousness. The title of this episode speaks for itself, really. For 98% of human history, 99.9% of our ancestors lived, breathed, and interacted with a world that they saw and felt to be animate, imbued with life force, inhabited by and permeated with forces with which we exist in ongoing relation. This animate vision was the water in which we swam. It was consciousness in its natural dwelling place, the normative way of seeing the world and our place in it. It wasn't a theory, a philosophy, or an idea. It wasn't actually an ism. It was felt experience. It lived in bones and bloodstreams, in horripilated hairs rising to meet a world of equally vibrant mists. It lived in tongues and teeth, in spines and eyes, in points of meditative focus found in downward and upward gazing. It lived in the gurgling of streams, the pounding of drum beats, the sound a breath makes as it passes through nostrils. It was an ongoing discussion that took place most often without words. It was simply how things were, which is why it has been commonly understood across the entire world for all of time.
That was the piece I left out, the descriptor poetry woven.
We'll explore what this animate vision specifically means a little further on, but it's important to get a few things really clear right at the beginning.
What did you say, Kabir?
Oh, just that when I was giving a list of adjectives and descriptors, that was the one I neglected and left out was poetry. You really.
Yeah, poetry. Yeah, it's poetic. Yes. Okay, I'm going to just play a little bit more and then we'll go to discussion. Maybe I'll skip ahead a little bit too.
One is the scope and scale that we are talking about here in terms of time. So again, if you're a human being, and I take it by the fact that you're listening to this that you probably are, then at least 99.9% of your ancestors were animist. 99.9% of your ancestors. The vast, vast majority of your ancestors lived in the Paleolithic, the land where all things talk, the realm of ladies. It's part of the nation. So why, wherever I travel, whatever tradition I encounter, from British poetry to Nigerian Ifa, to Western alchemy, to the Kabbalah, to the Songs of Orpheus, why do I find this animate vision? Why in every home I visit, from India to Cambodia, do I see household guardian deities staring back at me with big round eyes? Because animism is normative consciousness. For all that we think that we're beyond animism, our modern world is totally steeped in it. In children's cartoons, the trees are full of eyes. Even teacups and saucers have eyes and voices. Animals talk. Trees do too. Mushrooms have a life all their own. I've seen some weird shit, says Alice to Dorothy in that popular meme, meaning she's gone down the rabbit hole into the world where all things talk, the realm of fairy itself with its animate stones. This fairy realm is something that humans perpetually envision, describe, and seek. We cannot get away from it even if we try. For example, why do ads for technology hardware and networking systems insist on showing us a pulsing world of luminous, animate, glowing connectivity? Why do visions of future technology show us floating, animate icons imbued with some mystic life force, glowing like the white stone of revelation? Why, when the first generation of internet users came of age, did they immediately populate the internet with memes focused around what? Talking animals. In fact, we hear sometimes that the internet is simply an excuse for cat videos. Lol.
I'll stop there. You get a feel for it, though. It just flows and flows beautifully. And like I said, maybe you could even feel this a bit of a state change in that little bit. I get it now on the opening notes of the intro music. It's like, just whoa, here we go.
So I'm curious for other people how this discussion and presentation on animism landed upon you. I think I already mentioned that for me, it's just that how present it is in my life. Are any other people having that feeling?
For me, this was like, when I was in my late teens and early 20s, I had a period of my life which was profoundly animistic, where I was absolutely 100% totally living in a dialogic experience with the cosmos. I was as if a child of, and this was a loving parent, playful, kind, generous. And it was just like, I really actually thought that I had discovered uniquely what all the world religions have been pointing to. And I just needed to share it with people and we'd all get it in kumbaya. And it was such a beautiful experience. And it you know, like any state, it kind of waned. And just recently, I don't know if it was upon hearing the Emerald podcast or just before or somewhere in there, I've been undergoing this kind of odyssey of a life lately where just it's almost scripted how difficult things can be. And so I have been in this kind of prayer state of like, may I return to that experience where I felt a lovership between myself and the whole of existence. And it's actually as though that prayer is answered, in the sense of things are still going wrong in really kind of unexpected but obvious and playful ways, and also right, things are also going right, and that at the last minute, this program that I was looking forward to with Jeff Fitch, whom I love and have known for many years, you know, flipped to animism, which is also this kind of running theme that in itself was experienced by me as the animist quality of being. So yeah, big yes there, Tom.
To me, the no-ism thing connect with some kind of conflict between rational thinking and intuition, because we when you said about no-ism, we build theories and isms and whatever to make more sense of the world, but at the same time we put ourselves in a box, because then we cannot get out of this theory. And it's true for integral too, and it's very hard to convince kind of hardcore integrals that there is something that, you know, can explain differently. And intuition is just, you know, because you know, I mean, you don't, it's direct knowledge that you don't have to explain. And it feels, I mean, we cannot, I mean, if we live without it, I think we are missing, because
because we cannot know everything. And that's how I started kind of developing mine, because I felt that I don't know everything. There are always things that are known and unexpected and whatever. And if you don't rely on just, you know, just knowing that that's the right thing to do, whatever, and I cannot explain it. That's it. It's you are missing something, and I think now in the world we live in this two world of direct knowledge, the direct connection, and our theory and isms and stuff. I mean, yeah, but yeah, we cannot. I mean, definitely the animism is part of us. And that's why I started actually practicing shamanism and went to drumming circles, because I felt that I was so much hardcore rational and brainy that I felt that something is missing and I need to pull myself out of it to do something that it was hard for me to do at the beginning, but just to push myself out of the ism and the rational thinking and get the other side, the other way of kind of experiencing the world.
Yeah, Tamar and Kabir, you bring up the larger question. This episode, this program for me, this was fascinating. Thank you so much for putting this together, especially under such short notice. But this kind of established something for me that I already knew intellectually, that animism is Homo sapiens' baseline consciousness. It's been for the totality, for our entire existence as species Homo sapiens. This has been the baseline consciousness for 95% of our existence as a species until we invented agriculture around 11,000 years ago. And then, so my creative work, with my background as a cultural historian, I'm actually fascinated by how we shifted out of that as we began agriculture, and then moving through the levels of cognitive development, Piaget's levels. I mean, you know, Ken Wilber has mapped this out for us. There are very distinct stages of cultural as well as individual cognitive evolution. And one of the questions, why did we ever leave? And what? And the answer I come up with, I don't hold with, you know, a lot of people these days are saying, oh, we were better off when we were all animus. Why did we, inventing agriculture was the biggest mistake mankind ever made? Well, I don't buy that argument. You know, when I had to have a root canal, I was very grateful for modern dentistry. You know, in the Middle Ages, one of the #1 causes of death were abscess tooths where the infection went to the brain. I mean, what a painful way to go. You know, I'm very grateful for a lot of the things we have, but what my current working theory is, you know, the shift away from animism into the polytheism, and then monotheism, and then rationality, and then the postmodernism, and now integral, is we learn a new level of self-regulation as individuals and as cultures at every stage. And now having those of us here who are putatively integral, we now have this is my current working theory I'm tossing out to you folks. We now have the potential to move into any of these states of consciousness. We can, and this is part of the stated goal of integralism, you know, the whole circles around Ken Wilber and others, is that we can reanimate all of these levels of consciousness, animism, polytheism, you know, whatever was true and good and beautiful in each of these, and enter those as appropriate and move out of them when another mode is more appropriate. That we can self-regulate at all these levels, and we can literally integrate them. We have access to all of them and use them. And this is why I'm really grateful for this episode, because this gave us a chance to really viscerally experience that this base, once again, reclaiming the beauties and the truths and the glories of this baseline level, which is the foundation of human consciousness. I guess that's enough of an excited burble. So
what comes to mind to me, and I actually gave some thought about this, how we've evolved and changed and how we stepped away, but I'm guessing that a farmer was still has some level of animism, some connection with the land, the mountain men, the hunters, the people that lived in frontier areas and the pioneers of all kinds, not just people in new lands, but pioneers in thought or stuff like that. And then you can also find all this, like if you look at, like you think monotheism, and I think I heard this somewhere, I can't remember if it was, because I read a lot of sources and listen to a lot of different things on this topic. That if you go to a Catholic church, most Christian churches, there's these characters with wings on them, these bird-like wings on a human-like body, and you pray to these angels and you ask the angels for guidance and stuff like that, and so there's a lot of remnants of this in there. And then the other thing that comes to mind is, so I was a teenager in the 60s, and I lived in Berkeley in the 60s and experienced all that psychedelic renaissance. And we're seeing a lot of that now with people who wouldn't ordinarily use psychedelics, using psychedelics for therapy. And I'm wondering if there's going to be a whole other, like not just a ripple, but a wave from all of that, like a bigger shift and over time. I don't know how long it'll take, but does anybody have any thoughts on that?
It's definitely happening. It's I think we're in a fiddly place. So there's a legalization happening, but there's a bunch of places that don't have it legal yet. But there's a big underground scene as well that I see is happening. Yeah, it's definitely happening.
I think it calls for the re-enchantment of both our experience and the possibilities. And it's funny, as I listen to this presentation, even though I understand developmental theory, a lot of developmental theories, like in Spiral, you drop into orange when necessary, when you want to shore it up. You can move into postmodernism. I can move into integral. Even though I knew it, I was in conflict through much of this presentation, going, what's pre-trans? Where's the anthropomorphism? I am not nearly as integrated as I thought. And I'm a little humbled by how primary animism is in the creative process. So I got a lot of truing up to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned the creative process, because who do we turn to for help in our creative process? The muse.
I would also like to throw in, as we open ourselves up again consciously to these bandwidths of consciousness that we have left behind in order to evolve through the various levels of reason, etc. We have shadow work to do at all these levels too. And there are some very powerful shadows in animism. What this program tonight has emphasized for me is I'm resonating with the idea that animism is like 95% of our awareness. It's our baseline, it's our foundation, and we still live in it. Fairy tales, a lot of our fiction, a lot of our entertainment, and some of it's very dark. As I tabulate this in my current working theory of how everything works, I see horror movies. Like, why do we go see horror movies? We're facing some of the shadow side of not entirely, but largely that layer of animism in our psyches. So let's not yes. Along with Tom about being humble about this, let's also remember that we have shadow work to do at every level as we integrate them. And some of the shadow side of animism, there's the beauty, the glory, the wonder, the enchantment, the re-enchantment of the world. Well, but if we don't consciously work with the shadow side, it will hit us through our blind side. So let's not be naive, but let's not be fearful. Let's move forward with this. Let's embrace it, but not in a naive way.
And speaking of work to do, like and integral and spiral dynamics is we have developmental work to do. Shadow work along with the developmental work, but then what's available to us, integrating animism with it, as we move into higher levels. It's in one of the groups, I asked Marjorie a question of, has your sense of the animate been with you through all the stages? Like she had recognized that it was with her as a child. And I hadn't thought of that question before, but when I answered that for myself, it was always there, but it was asleep for a while. It was, and as soon as I turned back to it, it was like, oh yeah, you're, like, it's like a friend that was just waiting to be recognized again.
Yeah, I want to just
I want to-
go ahead, Tamar.
Kamal, I want to say something about the enchantment. I didn't think about it just good, because if everything has spirit, but there were bad spirit because they were enchanted by nature, but they lived, there were a lot of things that they were afraid of, right? I mean, they didn't know how the weather is going to work, or if they're going to be eaten by a tiger or whatever. It's not that they live in a, well, we look from a side, it looked like paradise. You are you don't have anything to worry, and you live in, in harmony with nature, blah blah blah. But they were afraid, because I mean, they are without fire, they are dead. I mean, I don't know, when they discover fire, but it was a fearful world. I mean, now we are we are other things to be afraid of, right? Because all the things that we create, but we are not as much afraid of nature. Well, now yes, because of climate change, we cannot escape nature. I don't know, I'm going back and forth, but it's not idyllic, not at all. They didn't live an idyllic world. I don't think that they felt like, even so they were connected to the world. The world is, as it's good and bad, the beauty and the scary. And that was, even religion perceived God, or at least ancient religion, as vengeful and merciful. I mean, they saw both sides of, even later development, so both sides of the deity of the, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. My sense of it, and I've been studying this for a while, sort of more academically, but the way I reconstruct the early animists, the first 180,000 years of our existence as a species was almost like a spiritual state of being in the moment, but without any control. It's like when it was wonderful, it was wonderful. When it was horrible, it was horrible. We were at the mercy of natural forces, and things could shift from moment to moment. And so I see from the literature I've read so far, my sense of, when anthropologists talking about animistic level peoples, that they see their value system was in terms of light and dark. And not good or bad, that comes later, but light and dark. There are light spirits and dark spirits. And voodoo, juju, witchcraft, that's a later evolution of this level. There are powerful forces. We sense the spirits in the rock and bushes, and we communicate with them, and they communicate with us, and we learn to maneuver our way. But everything was magic. There was nothing that wasn't magic, but the magic wasn't always. It wasn't always beautiful. Sometimes it was horrible, and we had no control. It was just whatever was happening. So this is what we have gained. I guess this is partly what I meant about the ability to self-regulate, and look at what we're doing with our technologies these days. And I'm thrilled about the potential for the longer future once we've addressed things like global warming, because we can re-enter these energies, these real energies. They were real, they're still real, but we can self-regulate now, internally and externally in ways we couldn't. And so to reintegrate, re-enchant the world without the downsides. So I'm really thrilled at the potential here, but who knows what we'll actually do with it.
So could we say that whether it was light or dark, the early animus was the advent of the subtle state coming online?
That's how I see it. Some called in some traditions the astral plane. Yeah, and some people are still psychic. Even very modern people are still psychic. We
I have to
lost
ask a
that in
question
order
about
to
that.
develop the intellect. We had to like focus our bandwidths, our conscious bandwidths. But now we're at the level where we can tune into all the radio stations as we choose. But we had to like focus on one station at a time in order to evolve up the various Piaget levels and the various Gebser levels. That's how I see it. But yes, I would identify that as subtle astral in my current state of ignorance.
But it shows that even though we're a bit more sophisticated, we're languaging it a little bit better, we've got a long way to go.
No,
But that's the thing.
more what you meant about the early subtle animus. I mean, to me, the animus state, and I think maybe it was Eloy that said this about it wasn't even, or maybe it was on the podcast, but it wasn't the word is relatively new. It was the lived experience prior to that. And to me, the animus state is in the stages model, equivalent to the 1.0 and the 1.5, which in my languaging is pretty subtle. Although I don't disagree that the interpenetrates all the way up and all the way down. But to me, that the animist expression is cognitively or cognizantly probably like deeply fused somewhere down there. Does that resonate with what you're asking as well, or am I confused? Yeah.
No, I think so. But there, the state experience and the lack of the cognitive line of development are two different things. They are having that experience, but the lack of cognitive development, it spins off into all kinds of scary and not so scary things.
Yeah, so I guess maybe what you're saying, if I'm understanding you, is that it's at the dawn of the subtle kind of 3.0 stuff that we actually start to call animism, even if we don't give it yet words, but that part of our experience becomes an object.
Well, this gets into the whole pre-trans thing, and it's actually gets very complex, because the way in my current state of understanding, as we were animists for that first 95% of our existence as a species, we were open to all of the states that Ken Wilber's identifies: subtle, low subtle, high subtle, low causal, high causal, and into the transcendent. We were just open to all of it. Whatever whatever came flooding through us. And we had the shamans were the ones, as I reconstruct this in my historian's mind, the shamans were the ones who had some ability to self-regulate and move from one state to another, and they could help self-regulate for the tribe. They could get the tribe doing, oh, this is happening, we better do this dance right now, get everybody doing the dance. And that basically they were the psychological self-regulators for the whole tribe. That is how I reconstruct this. And you remember, if you're familiar with the Ken Wilber's theory, that anybody at any one of the stage structures can experience any state, all the way up, all the way down, the entire spectrum. As I interpret this, what we gain as we go up through Piaget's levels and Gebser's levels is an increasing ability to self-regulate at whatever, one by one. And so what we lost was the openness to the subtle and the causal and the non-dual and the transcendent, because we've had to focus very much on whatever cognitive level we were currently learning to self-regulate at. And I have a spreadsheet about all of this, yada yada.
That's a very brief period. When Orange comes online and it demands operational definitions, there's a brief period where we're taking a hiatus from the non-quantifiable,
yes,
in order to bring that online.
Yes, we did it so
Our
fast.
existence in the subtle.
We did it so fast, and it was so thrilling to the people who were in the early generations. I mean, they were saying, it was Alexander Pope who wrote, "Nature and nature's laws lay hid in night. God said, let Newton be, and there was light." I mean, this was so thrilling when people first, what we can understand rationally, and it's so powerful. And this was Ken Wilber's point, that every next level up on the cognitive development is 10 times more powerful in terms of successfully dealing with ourselves and the world around us and each other. And it's seductive. Look how fast rationality. It only took a few hundred years.
With the advent of modernity in science, you can feel the protests of postmodernism, specifically the
Wait, when you say feel it, how do you, I'm lost on that.
I lost the word. The Sartre, Nietzsche were the existentialists.
Okay.
You can feel existentialism as a protest of the loss of enchantment.
Yes.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
because they realize the dearth of the whole thing, that nothing's animated anymore. It's only what's observable and quantifiable. So it casts, postmodernism in a different light for me at this point.
Because we started to see what we had lost.
Yeah.
We started to feel what we had lost.
Jerry, earlier you made the comment about what you include and how much we don't include. And in fact, there's that, I love that frame through a mathematical lens, because when we realize that there are perspectives we don't include, the fact it becomes a fraction of a set number of perspectives over an infinite set. And so the inclusiveness of our awareness, our integrality, is fast approaching zero relevance and utility. And then Tamar also mentioned the intuition, which to me is the kind of polar flip of that, of like, if I'm in my intuition, then I'm in that state of I am the truth. There is no distance between me and the whole truth. And so there is no part left out. There is no, I am the infinite set in my wisdom, in my capacity. And to me, there's like animism in the sense, so I posted a poem in the chat. The great way, I'm just going to read the first few lines. The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undistinguished.
Yeah.
Make the smallest distinction, however, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart.
Yeah.
And this happens for the infant at 1.0 and for the sage at 8.5 in the stages, model. And I love Suzanne for, introducing me to this idea that, you sweep up here to 3.5, you develop a self, and then you begin to transcend that self. And so I'm so fascinated, Eloy, by your question about, what's coming back and where are we in this? And Tom and Karen also, you've been referencing this in the historic view and the evolutionary views of things. Like, to me, what's really vital is, how does this conversation inform our practical response to the whole state of the world today? And one of the things that came up for me a lot in these conversations was the relationality. If a stone is animate, then I have a relationship to the stone. I have Mother Earth and Father Sky, and I have all my relations. And to me, this is the new 4.0 collective that is the predominant subject of our species' journey right now. And so I'm in this because I want to know, how do we become the scent of that beauty.
Nice, Kabir.
As you're speaking, like what comes up for me is that some realization that was somewhat woven into that meditation that, like if I can understand, I can conceptualize, I guess, that the light from the sun comes down and hits that piece of gravel in the driveway and is part of what lights up my world, keeps me warm enough, allows me to see. And so if that little piece of gravel in the driveway has a certain amount of power that keeps me alive, what is the power of my loving intention going out the other direction? That's the kind of thing like this brings to me the like how like the if we're saved, we will be saved by that critical mass of loving intention. And somehow there's something, again, I don't know if I'm expressing it well, but there's something in there that feels relevant to answer your question, like what is this, what is the path forward?
Yeah, interesting. I have this idea, by Marjorie, that it's like when we like doing the meditation, you're saying tap in and feel what's coming up. To me, the practice of the felt sense work, focusing on felt sense, is connecting with the inner animal. Like there's this, there are these creatures that live, or sparks of creatures that live within us that we can, that can speak to us. And where I'm going with this is, I shared this in one of the breakouts too, is that I feel that there's a field of great wisdom that's only available through my individual felt sense in conjunction with the felt sense of others in the room. Like even this discussion now stuff is coming through that wasn't there 10 minutes ago or an hour ago. I don't know, for me, through me, and it's not that. Yeah, it's just so I called it potential, a field of potential. And to me, it feels like animism gives me a sense of animism gives me a greater access to that.
I'm a little more humbled than Kabir on this, because I keep thinking of the Hegelian idea of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. And maybe that's what we're relegated to do. As our complexity increases, it's probably going to be an endless spiral of doing that, is trying to add more and to make it fit. I don't think it's all going to appear at once. Would you like to argue with me on that, Kabir?
Yeah, well, two things. A, can we include in that pre-thesis as well as thesis, antithesis, and synthesis? And then the other, Robin Lincoln Wood brought up this point in an article a while back that's really stuck with me. If we look at ourselves in a trajectorial sense, along a spiral or a line or ladder, or however, we have, at least today, we have the projected heat death of the universe and entropy as a factor to contend with in all of this. And so there's a majesty to this endless spiral design, and yet there's also profound ordinal transcendence. Right now in integral, we often refer to that as tears. And what's got me excited around that is, so Robin was asking, he had an audience with Stephen Hawking, and he asked him, can we reverse the heat death of the universe? And Hawking said, we don't know yet, right? But to me, the heat death of the universe rather than a boring end state, I'm more excited to look at that as like a breaking of an egg state. Like from the point of view of the yolk, we're going to use up everything here into a state of equilibrium that is the heat death of heat, or maybe it's just the opening to some new ordinate quality of existence that is transcendent of all that we can perceive or imagine here. So I'm with you on the, like, there are cycles and circles, and I certainly die and recreate myself and make an idiot of myself again and again. And yet there's, when I look at Jerry, and this has been up for me again and again in this today, like, Jerry, I've known you for 11 years or 12 years or something, you know, and man, the guy I met and the guy that presented and led us today, I mean, I love both of those people if I just stood them in a room next to each other, but there is something happening.
Well, thank you. And of course, you know, teachers, all of you, you know.
Kabir, the same could be said for you. Having known you over a decade and how you show up now, definitely some evolution at play there. Thank you.
Been more than a decade.
I didn't want to try to parse out the actual number. I know just know it's over a decade.
It's funny. This was a fun discussion. See what happens spontaneously? It's giving me a lot to think about. Jesus.
I wanted to throw one more thing out that I forgot on the personhood thing. That's a really easy one to get a sense of personhood with, is fire. Like if you've ever sat around a campfire or sat in front of a fireplace or, you know, stared at a candle and got lost in staring at a candle. You know, the flames, the smoke, the burning of the whole experience of fire seems like there's definitely movement in it, but it feels like more than that. It's not just something you're witnessing, but something you can feel and sense.
Yeah, it's that alteration state that seems to be an accelerant in all of our growth. Because just being able to move into that contemplative, subtle state, you can feel how much it really just pushes our growth. And we should know that. That's one of the things I've learned about the Europeans, is they favor the state experience over the intellect, knowing that it kind of lays the bedrock upon which you can build the cognitions. So, yeah, fire. I often think of fire.
Oh, and the other thing that was kind of mentioned, I don't even remember if I said this already or I said it in a breakout, was that sense of place, like sacred places, and we've all experienced that walking into a sacred, you know, like a cathedral or a mosque or something like that, or a university, or you know, the Grand Canyon, or for us in San Diego, standing at the ocean, at the edge of the ocean, or in the ocean. It's powerful stuff, that sense of place, and to me that has. I want to tie that in with animism. I'm not exactly sure how to tie that in, but it's alive. The place is alive for me, and it's speaking to me, or speaking with me, and inviting me to experience more.
Probably why there's so many baptism rituals around water.
Yeah, there you go. And trials by fire.
All right.
Okay.
This was fun.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, and again, big thanks to Jerry for all that.
Great
work.
job, Jerry. I really enjoyed this.
It was a lovely program. Well, goodbye,
No, the
everybody.
recording will be up in a couple of days. Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
I
thanks,
really
everybody.
appreciate it.
See you,
Here,
Elliot. Good
Elliot,
to
thanks
see
for
you.
coming.
Bye, Lynn. Bye,
Bye,
Stephen.
everybody.
Ciao.
Good to see you,
Good night.
Kabir.
For further information, including upcoming events, resources, links to our Facebook and Meetup pages, and our fabulous donate button, please visit our website at sandiegointegral.org. Donations are greatly appreciated and help us to continue to provide information and connection within the Integral community.